Hey, Hair Gamers, this is Donovan, your producer of the Hair Game Podcast, and we have a special episode today where we are turning the tables. We have Eric Taylor as a guest today, and the day that this episode is dropping is the 25th anniversary of Salon Republic.
Yes, how about that?
Woo!
I don't really like having the tables turned.
Well,
I like turning the tables. I don't like the
Y-
tables turned on me.
yeah, well, don't worry. I won't make the questions too difficult. Well, I won't grill you too hard. But anyway,
You are the editor. So now you're the host and the editor. You hold all the cards.
complete utter control. And and this is kind of looking behind the curtain. This is my first time, showing my face probably on the YouTube side of it.
I know.
So people
It's
get to
pretty
see.
cool.
I mean, if people follow Salon Republic, they probably see me on the Instagram here or there. But yes, this is the mysterious Donovan that he references throughout the episodes.
The listeners know Donovan, but they don't know all of Donovan. So it's nice that you're on here and they get to see your face. And before we go, before you get to turn the tables on me, I'd like the listeners to know that Donovan has a very special voice. It's one of those things that people don't know about Donovan, but you were a professional singer, right?
Yeah, yep. I performed professionally for about 7 years on cruise ships around the U.S., doing a cappella. So
yeah, that's why your voice is so silky.
Well, I've learned a few things over the years.
So maybe you'll indulge us in just a quick tune before the end of the episode. Just throwing it out there.
We'll see what happens.
Okay, so now you can turn the tables back.
Great. Well, I want to start with just give us a brief history of you yourself, Eric Taylor, so people know a little bit more about you. Start with where you're from and your background, basically leading up to Salon Republic. What is Eric Taylor pre-Salon Republic?
Eric Taylor pre-Salon Republic. I am from Dallas, Texas. My dad is first generation Italian from New York City. And my mom is kind of from the sticks and in the countryside of Texas, and as poor can get. And my dad also raised very, very modestly. And he found his way to Dallas with this company that he was working for 1,000 years ago and met my mom, and I popped out. And I popped out as Eric DiGiacomo because my dad, like I said, is Italian. So I was born Eric DiGiacomo. DiGiacomo is a very common Italian name. If you ever care to figure it out, you can, if you Google search DiGiacomo, there's 5 trillion DiGiacomos in Italy. And it's loosely translated to of James. D means of, and Giacomo is like loosely James. So kind of like Jameson would be an actual, translation maybe. But it's a very difficult name to live with in English-speaking countries, English-speaking cultures, because it's got a space in it, D-I space, capital G-I-A-C-O. So growing up, I had teachers call me DeWakamole. I had, the other kids called me some derivations, ridiculous derivations of DiGiacomo.
I'm sure they're much worse than guacamole.
Exactly. There was DeJockstrap. There was
there you go.
De this and De that. And so a very difficult name to live with. And my parents encouraged me strongly to change the name to something simpler between high school and college, which is kind of a natural inflection point in one's life. You go off into a different kind of environment with different people. So it's easy to change your name then. And that's what I did. Taylor, where did it come from? It was, I just kind of picked it out of a hat, to tell you the truth. I mean, I wish I need to develop some story out of thin air. I should ask ChatGPT to come up with a good story for me. There really isn't a very good story. I just thought that I liked the way it sounded and felt and wrote and looked and everything, and I chose it. So it's kind of my adopted last name. It's my real last name. And, I exist in the world as Eric Taylor. ever since 18 years old. I'm almost 50 now. And however, my pre-18-year-old friends and networks, they still call me. They actually really leaned into calling me DiGiacomo after I changed it, of
Of
course, right?
course.
So I'm still called the jockstrap and still called the guacamole with a certain percentage of my friends. Um, yeah, so let's see. I'm from Dallas, and I grew up in a household where both of my parents were pretty productive people. So my dad owned a real estate business, a very small real estate business, never had any employees. He always did everything himself, solo. He had his office there in the house, and he, let's see, at his peak, he had 5 warehouses that he had bought, and he was running these warehouses himself. And um, very interestingly, with all the benefit of hindsight, being a business person now for the last many years, and I I really credit him for recognizing his own limitations. He had um his strengths were that he was pretty pragmatic. I think he had really good judgment. He, you know, knew what would work. He looked at a building here, a building there, and he chose the one that would work. And he was good at making it appealing so a tenant can come in. Oftentimes his tenants were things like, you know, auto repair tenants, or like a storage company that would store, like boxes or something. It's very unsexy, all of it, but very practical. And but his limitations were that he had very low tolerance for pressure, or things that he didn't like. He would get in these conflicts with the tenants. Let's say they stopped paying rent, or let's say they screwed up, they would damage the building and take advantage of things. And he would get very upset, and he lacked kind of that tolerance that's necessary when you're dealing with other humans who sometimes do things that piss you off and cost you money and cost you time and anguish. And so I think if he ever had an employee, he probably would have been a nightmare to work for. Um, and so he had the self-awareness, to his great credit, to keep things relatively simple. And so he never hired anybody. And what that meant was that my brother and I, growing up, were his de facto free labor. And so he would have my brother and I doing whatever. We would, let's say a tenant stiffed him and left, a space and with a bunch of garbage in it. And he would send my brother and I over to the space, or bring my brother and I to the space. And it was our job to clean out, this large warehouse. And
Sorry, I thought that was going in a different direction. That he was gonna send you and your brother out to collect like strongmen, go break some
That's
ankles
funny.
or kneecaps.
Well, yeah, he 100% would have done that if
Yeah.
if he thought that we might be slightly capable of it. But given our youth and diminutive physical statures, we wouldn't have been very good at it. So
Yeah.
what we were good at, let's say 10 years old up to 16, 17 years old, we were good at sweeping a warehouse and cleaning up the garbage and doing all sorts of other things that were just necessary. And that was part of growing up. And I remember my parents, we had a yard, and there were lots of hedges and everything, and it was my brothers and I and my responsibility to do the yard. And if there was a Saturday where my friends were going off and playing, it didn't matter that I wanted to go do that. I had to trim the hedges, and the hedgerow was really long, and it would take me probably 2 days straight. And so, I would spend the weekend doing hedges when all my friends didn't have to do shit like that. They could go off and play. And so, I don't want to give the impression that this was like tremendous adversity, because obviously, people deal with much more adverse things, but it was more adversity than my friends had. That's for sure. I definitely, there was some character building in there because my parents didn't F around with a lot of this stuff. It's like I had to do it. It didn't matter. Texas, it's 115 degrees, during the day. And they didn't tell me when to do it. I just had to do it. So then I would complain at noon as I'm out there, taking care of these things. And they would say like, well, if you don't like to do it in 115-degree heat, then wake up earlier. It's that kind of thing, dummy. And so there was a lot of things like that that I grew up with that I think were a little different than the other kids that I went to school with. My parents did well enough to send me to a school that was a private school. It was a Catholic school. My high school was all boys. We had to wear suits and stuff, and there was discipline involved there. You couldn't F around. And if you effed around, your quality of life went south fast, So it's like you just learned that it was not in your best interest to F around. So you might as well sit down and learn this calculus bullshit, or else your life was gonna go south fast,
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody wants to learn that stuff, but you figure it out, So my mom was also a highly productive person. She was born so poor, I don't even think they had any money, like zero money, not even a little money. It's like zero money. It's like they kill their own food, kind of, poor. Like my granddad, my mom's dad, built their house, like physically built it from start to finish, foundation all the way up. There were gaps in the boards that make the walls, and so when the wind would blow at night, it would blow right through the gaps in the walls.
Wow.
And there was like in one part of the house, she tells us there was a dirt floor, and they would, and they didn't have beds, and so they would sleep on the ground. And I think they eventually got a one of those things, like a furnace, like a little fireplace kind of contained thing, so that it wouldn't, catch the house on fire and burn it. And so that was how poor she grew up. And so my mom is no bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like she has no patience for kind of the luxuries of modern life. She's in her 80s now, right? So that gives you some context. But she has no tolerance for any kind of complaining about anything that
No
people
excuse that you
complain
could come
about.
up with would compare to how she was raised. So yeah, you didn't have a leg to stand on when it came to that.
Nothing. Are you kidding me? No.
Yeah.
I mean, she so this was the environment that she was born in, and she had ambitions greater than those kind of around her. She went to a school with like 8 people in it. I mean, it's practically Little House on the Prairie stuff. Obviously not that long ago, but that was kind of the environment, country sort of stuff in the sticks in Texas. And my granddad was the kind of person who did everything himself. And, he would go and buy cattle and, like raise the cattle and then get them bigger and then try to sell them for more and like grow crops and stuff. So it was pretty Little House on the Prairie. So, but she had greater ambitions. She wanted to go to a bigger city, which was Dallas. And so she eventually got a desk job somewhere, and that was horrible. And there was, um, like oftentimes employees weren't treated very well, especially women employees weren't treated very well back then. So she wanted to get a better job. She eventually became a flight attendant at Braniff. For those old enough listening to the pod, you might remember Braniff. That seems like 1,000 years ago now, but so she wore those kind of poochy outfits, in the 50s and 60s, and to become a flight attendant was kind of a big deal, especially for somebody, in the sticks, because all of a sudden you're getting paid to fly around the world. You're going overseas. You're going to Hawaii. You're going to these extremely exotic places that many people in the environment, from the environment that my mom was from, never expected to experience. And so she was able to kind of get herself, you know, or raise herself to the level where she was having these experiences. And so she met my dad as he was traveling for work, on a flight, after a flight, and they settled in Dallas, and then had my brother and I. So getting raised in this household. Oh, sorry. So my mom became an artist. So she stopped being a flight attendant because the hours were insane. You know, you'd be out of town for 10 days or whatever, and then back home for like one day, and then out of town for another week. So she stopped doing that. And she thought of something that she could do while raising my brother and I in the house. And she became an artist. She became an oil painter, and her name is Frances DiGiacomo. She has a presence online, although it's kind of a primitive presence online. But she was rather successful. Still paints and sells her paintings for quite a bit of money. She's done a good number of portraits for famous people. You know, not necessarily paintings just of famous people, but famous people have commissioned her to paint them. A lot of athletes, Jim Brown from the old days, Emmitt Smith, the Dallas Cowboy, Roger Staubach, Nolan Ryan is a famous baseball player. She got commissioned to paint a Warren Burger, who's a Supreme Court justice. She painted the King of Mongolia. And a number of people. She became a painter for some kind of big, I guess you would call it a patron family, some big money kind of families in the South who paid her to paint portraits of them. And she's painted a lot of landscapes and things like that. So rather successful. I mean, like, you know, to actually make money as an artist, like that kind of an artist where you're painting like things that people don't have to buy, that's hard, you know. And I think she did that. She was able to do that primarily because of some of the things that I heard, you know, her talking about at dinner time growing up, which were things like, it matters the subject matter that she paints. It's like she can't paint whatever she wants. You know, if she wants to actually sell the painting, she needs to paint something that people want to buy, you know. And it sounds very obvious, but many artists are, you know, they think that, you know, they should be able to just paint whatever, you know, comes into their inspiration, and that somebody should buy it, and they should be able to make money doing that. Well, my mom kind of balanced this practicality with the skill of the art, and probably selling 20 paintings a year, you know, and these are pretty expensive paintings. So, you know, I grew up learning these lessons of my dad, kind of that very unsexy reality of the warehouse business, and then the rather more exciting reality of the art business, with all of its kind of artistry and creativity combined with kind of the pragmatic nature of it, you know, having to paint things that people actually want to buy. And I grew up thinking that I wanted to do something on my own too. My brother, who's 4 years older, had, I think, the same philosophy, although he and I are quite a bit different. He also wanted to do his own thing, so he became an architect. And that was kind of his way of combining the desire to do something creative with the desire to, and the expectation that one should be able to make a living doing this creative thing. And so when I graduated, I went to college. I was pretty athletic, you know, and by the way, I did pretty well in school. I, you know, was smart enough to kind of.
What'd you major in?
I majored, well, in high school it was whatever, and then in college it was business.
Okay.
So I first started in marketing, and in college you can kind of start with one thing and then change it if you want. I started with marketing, and through the first year of marketing classes, I was like, yeah, this isn't that interesting to me. And then as I'm talking to the teachers, uh, they're kind of outlining what life after college looks like for somebody who majored in marketing. And I'm like, I don't really like that idea very much. And it just seemed like a frickin' lifelong grind, kind of like low paid and underappreciated and kind of that kind of a thing. And I was like, I don't think this is good. So I'm going to go over here to this business thing because I think it's more practical. And then I can kind of cram something creative into the practicality of business. And I think I'd learned already a lot about both, a creative endeavor as well as a business endeavor, just with my parents being around. But I did the whole business thing. So it was horrible. I hated school. I mean, I was good enough at it. I was fine. My grades were pretty good. But I hated it. And so there is a lot of tenacity that comes with, hating something and doing it well,
Yeah.
But I was also, I had this major part of my life that was sports. And before I got to college, my favorite sport was volleyball, but it wasn't terribly popular. I played for the Texas State boys team it was called Tejas. And so I was really good at volleyball. But the main sport that I was doing was baseball, and I was achieving some things in baseball. And so when it came to college time, my parents were like, you should be able to get a scholarship in college for baseball. And I was like, oh, okay, if you think so. And so they worked pretty hard to get me a scholarship. I went to Pepperdine and Malibu. I applied to schools all up and down the West Coast. I was tired of Texas weather. It was just so god awful. I joke that there's 2 weeks per year where the weather is good in Texas, and it's like once in the spring and once in the fall. And that's still the truth. And by the way, like, you want to talk about global warming or not, it was 115 in the summertime, in the mid 90s, just like it's 115 in the summertime now, and so it was just horrible. And as a high schooler, I'm watching Baywatch, David Hasselhoff is running down the beach with Pam Anderson. And I'm like, that's what I want to do, like F this ridiculously horrible, too cold, too hot weather of Texas. And so, my dream was to go to California. And so I applied to a bunch of schools up and down the coast in California. And the idea was to use baseball to get to, to get the best situation in college. And eventually Pepperdine took me, and they actually had the best baseball team, which is kind of ironic. So a lot of the worst baseball teams didn't have any interest in me. So that just, like, what does that tell you about life? You just got to turn over a lot of stones, and I realized that, that my dad put a lot of work in behind the scenes of actually calling the coaches and stuff. And we would jump on the plane to go meet the baseball coaches when they were playing like local schools, like UT or something like that. We would fly down to Austin. And so eventually that worked, and I got a scholarship to Pepperdine to play baseball. And by the time I got there, though, they had just won the NCAA championship, so it was like kind of a big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
And so I got there, and by the time I got there, I had hurt myself. So senior year in high school, I was a pitcher, and I developed a tendonitis issue in my rotator cuff in my right arm and right shoulder. And so it made it painful to actually do anything. So I got there, and I was like a loser recruit. I was like the worst.
Oh, no.
They spent money and effort on me to recruit me, but as is the nature of sports, sometimes you get hurt. And so I
Yeah.
showed up and I was useless. And so I played for 1 year. I threw in three games, 1 inning per game. I did fine, for each inning. But it would take me weeks to get my arm to the point where actually I could actually lift the arm above my head, because the inflammation would come in and all that. So I spent the whole first year pretty much in physical therapy, and it was just like nobody, no freshman in college, all of a sudden living on the beach, Pam Anderson and David Hasselhoff just like right over there on the beach. And like I'm in physical therapy every day. Like that was not my idea of how to do it. So I quit and never looked back on athletics. I started surfing, but basically I just got really interested in making sure that I was going to find something that I really liked doing, and then making sure that after I graduated from college in Malibu, California, that my lifestyle wasn't going to plummet. Because the lifestyle is pretty damn good in college. When things are getting paid for, and I had this you know underlying anxiety of oh shit, I'm going to graduate in 2 years, and what the hell am I going to do? And I was watching some of my older friends get out, get jobs. Some of them liked their jobs, some of them didn't like their jobs and stuff. Um, so I became very interested in looking at different businesses, and I really wanted to start my own business.
Well, that leads me perfectly into my next question. Before the inception of Salon Republic, did you start or want to start any other businesses before Salon Republic?
So I looked at a whole bunch of different things. Um, it's kind of like, before you get married to a girl or boy, you want to, kick the tires on a few and figure out, what's compatible and all that. And I think that was the case for businesses as well. I mean, I had I knew I was going to be kind of dumb, 22 years old coming out of college. You don't know anything. It's like everyone talks about hair school, how you don't know anything when you come out of hair school. Like it's kind of the same with college. You don't really know anything. I mean, they teach you a lot of theoretical things, but a lot of it is kind of it's difficult to really figure out like where the value is in the real world, and like all the soft skills that are necessary. But um, I looked at I don't remember a lot of the details, but I mean the salon business was one of the businesses I was looking at, and
Okay.
the reason that I happened upon it was because I was pretty close to my barber. He was a hairstylist really, but he had a few guy clients, and I was pretty close to him. I'd been going to him in Dallas for years, and he did my family. It's probably a typical family situation where he like did my mom for years, and so my dad just by default went to him, and then the kids by default went to him, and so I was going to him, and in the college years, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, all right, so there's 12 other people here in the salon. Like, how does this work? Like, you have to, I'm going to pay $50 for my haircut. Do you have to kick 25 to the salon, or how's that work? And it was a kind of a traditional booth rental salon. And I'm like, interesting. So you pay, $250 a week to work here, and there's 12 other people, and there's the owner over there. She's sitting at the front desk, and it was a very typical setup. And I'd just gone to him for so many years that I just picked his brain for so long. I mean, probably 10 years. From the time that I first started kind of being observant about what was going on in that salon. And it was nice that I was able to go to the same salon because I was able to see changes over time and all that. And so that was, and I generally liked the the nature of the creativity, of the hair industry. The people who are in the hair industry obviously are creative people. And I often kind of say that my nightmare would have been becoming like an insurance salesman, and then I have to apologize to any insurance salesmen who like to listen to our hair podcast, which I assume there are none, but just in case there might be one, I want to apologize to him.
Sorry, Sal.
My
Sorry, John.
sorry, Sal. My nightmare was becoming an insurance salesman and doing something like excruciatingly boring that I would have no interest in. And the opposite of that in my mind was the salon business. Like, God, it's kind of fun. Like, people are creative and cool, and they enjoy their clients, and there's like this vanity aspect, and in a good way, not a bad way. Where people are made beautiful, and there's like joy and satisfaction that comes from that. They leave better and happier and more satisfied than when they came in. And how powerful is that? That's amazing. Like, that the warehouse business doesn't have that. The insurance business doesn't have that, or whatever other kind of nondescript, bullshit business jobs there are out there. And so I had my eye on it probably from before I consciously thought about it. And then, kind of fast forwarding to when I graduated from school, I was dating a girl in Dallas when I graduated, and I moved back in with my parents, and so I started going around town looking at salons, and I was trying to learn more, because I didn't feel like I knew enough to open my own salon. So I started going around to salons, and I would walk in and to just random salons. Of course, the one that I had been going to for so many years, I'd gotten to know the owner, and I learned some there. And I would walk into other salons and be like, I'd just like to talk to the owner. And so a few of them were willing to sit down and talk to me. And most of them looked at me like I was insane. Like, why are you here? Why do you care? Are you going to ask me for money or something? And, and then really the inflection point was when my girlfriend's hairstylist moved to one of the first studio-based salons. And my girlfriend, her name was Emily. Emily went and got her hair done by her hairstylist in her private studio for the first time. And Emily, she had a great time. She left the salon. She had graduated and was living at her parents' house, which is right down the street from my parents' house, which is very, very convenient and cheap. And she would get on the landline, because we're talking about 1998, and she would call me, and I would say, and she told me about this, new environment that her hairstylist went to, and how amazing it was, how happy she was, how she had her, she painted the walls her favorite color of whatever, and she was playing her favorite music, and had pictures of her kids up, all over, and she was controlling her own schedule, and she sold products to Emily, and Emily bought the products, and I've never seen her so happy, and I've known her for all these years. And so I thought, oh my God, that's so interesting. And it was literally 5 minutes from my parents' house. So I jumped in the car and drove down there, and I walked in the salon, and 10 feet in the salon, I looked around, and I'm like, oh my God, this is for me. Like, I know exactly what they're doing here, and I think I know exactly why they're doing it. And a guy walks up to me. His name is Keith, and he asked if I needed help. And I said, I lied to him right out of the gate. I said, I'm looking for a haircut. And so he walked me around, introduced me to a few people. Nobody could see me because they were busy, but I got their information. And then by the time we kind of made our way back to the front of the salon, I'm like, so here's the real deal. I just graduated from college, and like, I really like the salon industry, and I'm not a hairstylist, but I really like it here. And do you mind if I just hang around with you? Like, I'll roll around with you, and you don't have to pay me. I'm living with my parents. I don't have any expenses. And so I did that for about a year, and he was my mentor. So within that year, I learned a lot of things. I learned how to make hairstylists happy and successful. Well, I should say it this way. I learned what makes hairstylists happy and successful. And I learned that, them having control over their environment without a lot of the, difficult things related to going out to a storefront and opening, your own 1,000 square foot salon and putting in stations and things like that. I learned just how great them having control of their own spaces. And I learned how, all of their personality and creativity, could shine, and they can service their clients better, and they can have a better quality of life and make more money.
How
And
dev- how developed was the concept? Like, did they have individual built out studios, or like how far along in the studio suite model was it at that point?
so this was 1999, and it was pretty well developed. So Keith, my mentor, put up his first salon, I believe, about 10 years before that. He was a barber by trade, and he had the ambition to open his own barber shops, which he did in Lubbock, Texas, or Amarillo, Texas. And I think he got up to 5 barber shops. And, small barber shops with 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 people max. And he said that his life it went from servicing his clients and the things that he was good at and liked doing to constant conflict, dispute resolution, between the barbers and the shop, or the hairstylist, because it wasn't just barbers. He had a hairstylist in there too. Constant conflict, mayhem, difficulty, people mad at each other and things like that. And he's like, okay, so I wanted this. Like, I wanted to have my own shop, but I didn't realize that I was going to go from doing the thing that I liked to doing a bunch of stuff I hate. And so he's like, but you can't just like not do it anymore. I'm like, when you do this, you commit to something for a long period of time. So he's like, I'm going to try to put barriers between, the beauty professionals. And so it started with, I don't remember the details, but it started with probably like a curtain or something.
Yeah.
And then he started putting like walls, like actually, with studs and drywall and everything. He started putting walls in between the stations. And he realized that the more freedom and independence, and the more of, kind of their own space that he could give to the beauty professionals, the more they thrived and the fewer conflicts there were. And so he was doing this across his locations, and pretty much did it with all of them. And then he's like, okay, but the shops were not really created to do this. I think I can build a purpose built facility where people have their own space. It's not rocket science. And they'll have a little more space, and like the dimensions of the area will be better, and I can put in like plumbing and stuff. And so he did that. He opened the first studio salon in Amarillo, Texas, and I want to say it was like 1989, 1988 or something. He went into a grocery store, a former grocery store that had failed. And I think it was a big space. I think it was 15,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet in Amarillo, Texas. I mean, you can imagine, we have 20,000, we have a 26,000 square foot salon with Salon Republic right now, but that's in Beverly Hills, California. I mean, there's, tens of thousands of beauty professionals within just a couple miles of there. Amarillo, Texas doesn't have anywhere near that many people. And so to build such a large salon of a new kind, I mean, God, I'm not going to say that. The risk that he took was crazy, but it worked. So he built a beauty supply in the front part of it. similar to the beauty supplies that we have at Salon Republic, although much larger, and built studios within the rest of the space, and it was very successful and people loved it. So he ran it for a couple of years, and then he's like, I'm going to the big city. So he moves to Dallas, and he put up his first location in, I think, 89 or 1990. And so by the time I met him, I think he had built maybe 4 locations, and he was doing well. He liked what he was doing. The beauty professionals loved, their studios, and everything was awesome. And so well, I shouldn't say everything. Obviously, the normal conflicts that you have in business, but it just seemed to be a model that, the customer, the beauty professional enjoyed so much, and the clients to have that one-on-one time with their hairstylist versus, what you get in kind of a traditional open salon. The clients loved it so much more, and it was so obvious to me. So I told him after some period of time, rolling around with him, unpaid, I was like, Keith, I think I want to do this. I'm not going to do this here in Dallas because I would be competing with you, but I think I'd like to put up my own salon and somewhere else, and I think I want to do it in Los Angeles because I know LA. I've been there for 4 years during school. And so as I like to say, I dumped the girlfriend and I moved out because I was still
Oh, no.
dating Emily.
Thanks,
Emily
Emily.
wanted to get married.
Peace.
What's that?
Thanks, Emily. Bye.
Bye. So Emily was great. Look, she wanted to get married, and I was like 22, 23. She was the same. We were babies.
Yeah.
And I had no income. I was like, well, how do we get married with no income? This isn't like the 1940s, that all of her friends were getting married, and like these ridiculous things that were like, one of her best girlfriends got this huge engagement ring and showed it to me. And I'm like, okay, so what? Johnny didn't buy that ring. Johnny got out of college 3 minutes ago, and she's like, well, Johnny's parents bought the ring. And I'm like, that's just embarrassing.
Oh, boy.
Like, you're not even Johnny's not even an adult yet. I'm not an adult. You're not an adult. We're too young to get married. And so, we need to build a little bit of a foundation in our lives, and then we get married. Not that I want to, break up or whatever, but, and I'm like, so I really want to put up my first salon, and I think it would be great. And I think Los Angeles would be the place. And she's like, well, I'm not going to LA unless you engage me. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to engage you until we spend more time together, a couple more years. So, and I'm going to be in LA. So LA's awesome. She had been visiting me for a few years, but, and I understood her perspective on that totally, but we were not seeing eye to eye on it. So that was it for Emily. Bye.
Yep.
So then I went out to LA, and took me about a year to year and a half to put up the first Salon Republic. And that was in Studio City, which is just north of Los Angeles.
How did you choose that first location?
I remember exact locations that I was looking for. I probably had 5 locations kind of right up to the end before I was going to sign a lease and make a commitment on one. And I remember the exact locations. To this day, when I drive by one of them, inevitably, if somebody's in the car, I point it out to them. My wife knows exactly which location because I pointed out to her 15 times, 30 times which locations I was looking at. The Studio City location, I thought had the right mix of everything. Great area, high incomes, free parking, nice parking, convenient parking, decent price on the space, so I didn't have to charge the beauty professionals too much. Enough window studios, to make people happy who felt like they had to have windows. All those things. And that's really what it boils down to. And it's kind of the same today, 25 years later. Not really sure much of that has changed. It maybe has ebbed and flowed a little bit here and there, but the essence of it is still the same. And so that space, we're 25 years in that space, and it's still a good space. It's been improved over the years by the landlords. Unfortunately, the shopping center traded several times to new landlords, and every time it trades at a much higher price, and that means the property taxes and the expenses go up for us, along the way. So that's just the nature of it. But in the beginning, I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I had the benefit of having Keith as a mentor. He answered a lot of questions for me. He guided me, as much as he could. But I still just did so many things wrong, so many ridiculous things, that you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of one of my favorite anecdotes was when, so we're building it out, and actually I'm going to start with an earlier one. So I chose a contractor, and the contract that I signed with the contractor wasn't very good because I didn't know what I was doing. And so there were weeks of time when I wouldn't see one worker in the space. And so we opened late, which upset people and cost me money I didn't have and all that. And then kind of closer to that opening date, I had bought styling chairs and shampoo bowls and shampoo chairs, all that kind of stuff. And I had contracted with the company to ship these things to the space, and the salon space was on the second floor, right on Ventura Boulevard, a very busy street. And so the truck arrives one morning with all the stuff in it, and I'm there ready to go, ready to tell them where to put the boxes. And the dude rolls up on the street and he's like, "All right, here you go." And he basically just, opens up the tail of this enormous 18-wheeler, and he's like, "All right, have at it." And I'm like, "Have it what?" And he's like, "Well, these are your boxes, and you take them out and take them where you take them." And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's just me." And there's like, I think there are like 80 boxes or something. And each one was fucking heavy, right? Like a styling chair, it's like metal, a base, a pump. It weighs like, I don't know, 75, 80 pounds. And he's like, "No, you have to take it." And so it's just like, nobody told me that. Like, I just assumed that somebody was going to take all the boxes into the salon. And so I think it took me 5, 6 hours. And I swear to God, to this day, I think my back problems came from that one incident where
Wow.
I had to carry every single box. I didn't even have a dolly.
I was going to ask if you even had a dolly. No,
I didn't even have
he
a
didn't even
dolly.
give you. You didn't. Oh no.
No, he didn't have it. Well, like he wanted to go. He wanted to leave. Like he is not going to sit there for 5 hours. So he helped me take the boxes out of the truck,
Okay.
and he was pissed off about it only because he realized that if he didn't help me take them out of the truck and put them on the sidewalk on Ventura Boulevard, that he was going to be there all day, and he had other things he had to go pick up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he helped me put them. We basically stacked them along Ventura Boulevard, probably 8 feet high. These boxes stacked on each other, all the way down maybe 100 feet along Ventura Boulevard, and with the traffic rolling by fast and everything, it was just such a good example of how stupid you can be, when you do things like this. And like college doesn't teach you shit like this. Like you only learn stuff like this when you do it, and it's like street smarts, right? Versus book smarts. Book smarts, bullshit, like useless practically. And so anyway, I eventually got everything done, but that was just a good example. And I probably have another 100 examples of stuff just like that.
Well, I was going to ask you about a Salon Republic horror story, since we always do hair horror stories. It looks like we got to it a little early, but that's okay. We gave him a little early taste.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one.
That's probably a good one. Yeah.
As I'm talking, I'll noodle on. Yeah, I mean, we have plenty. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So,
Yeah, they're starting to flood in. So I got others if you want them.
so how long before you felt like it was working at the Studio City location, enough to the point where you were ready to expand?
It worked immediately. Pretty much worked immediately. Now, in the process of getting the thing from conception to open, that process is extremely uncomfortable. And it's still uncomfortable. We have 41 locations now, 25 years in. We have about 80 employees, 70 employees. And we have, construction team and, we have people who know what to do. Um, Obviously, I don't have to do all those ridiculous things like I just described, but I still have tremendous concern, worry, and anxiety for every new opening that we have. Um, so back then, it was almost like the ignorance was a little bit of bliss, because while I was very worried, that it wasn't going to work, that this new concept wasn't going to be accepted, I didn't know just how many things I had to worry about. So it can be rather excruciating, that process, like internally. Um, so I remember early on, I think my attorney told me that it was a stupid idea.
You're, oh no.
Yeah, no, yeah. My accountant said something akin to, "Why would you do that?" Um, the city of Los Angeles, who had to grant my permit, construction documents, and give me the right to open business, as it works, um, in any kind of uh, sophisticated society. Like, you've got to develop plans and spend a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. And then you send them to the city, and then you need approval. And so the city took forever, and I didn't have enough money to wait forever. And then they came back to me and they're like, "No, you can't do this." And I'm like, "What do you mean I
Why
can't do
not?
this? Like, I have a lease. I have to pay rent for 20 years. I'm bound to this responsibility." And by the way, I think I had enough cash for like 3 months. You know, I didn't have any margin of error. And so it was this horrible process. You're making me, you're reminding me of you're making me remember all these horrible things. And as the story was told to me by the person in building and safety in 1999, an attorney for the city had woke up in the middle of the night, all of a sudden concerned that that I was trying to do something illegitimate, and woke up in the morning and said, "We're not going to allow this." And so they came back to us and said, "No, you can't do this." And so that led to a process of, I don't know how long. It felt like a year. It wasn't a year. It's probably a month and a half, where we had to go back and forth and promise this and do that. We had to make changes to the inside of the salon, and all sorts of things that cost more money and took more time, and da 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 da. And it kind of reminds me of some of like the business principles that sometimes you hear people talking about. There's Murphy's Law, right? Murphy's Law.
Mm-hmm.
What's Murphy's Law? I'm gonna turn the tables on you. Do you remember that one?
Well, isn't it Murphy's Law is like, isn't that anything that can happen will happen, or something along those lines?
That's right. So anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So you ever heard of Schultz's Law?
I'm not. No, I'm not familiar with Schultz.
Schultz's Law says that Murphy was an optimist.
Nice.
All right. So I learned that one pretty early on. And my mentor, Keith, that was his favorite thing. And, so, you learn pretty fast that, you do what you can to ensure that things go right. and then you at the same time prepare yourself for when things go wrong. And I didn't do that early on, but that's a really important part of like navigating the world. And so anyway, there were those challenges, when we opened, but so yeah, everybody said that it wouldn't work. People like advisors were like, no, that's dumb and never work. I remember one of the first hairstylists that came in. Um, yeah, I mean, she came in and she was like, you're never going to get 45 hairdressers to work next to each other. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you. Thanks for the advice. Bye. Um, so she chose not to take a studio, um, but I after we opened, it became very, very clear very fast that it was going to be great. And I think out of the 40 studios, we still have 40 studios there. Out of the 40 studios, I think 20 people had taken studios, and um, they were good people, and they had good businesses, and one of them had some high profile people, and like celebrities and stuff. And I thought, oh my God, this is awesome, so awesome. So I worked the front desk for about, let's see, 2 years, 2 or 3 years. I was 80 hours a work, 80 hours a week in the salon. I didn't have enough money to lay all the flooring for the studios. So as people rented studios, I had to like run to Home Depot and buy whatever floor was on sale, within my, price range, which was zero. And then I would throw the floor in the back of my car. My car would like go low riding down the street to the salon. And then I would carry all the tile, up one by one, 20 trips into the salon, and then I would lay the floor. And I didn't know how to lay the floor, but I learned. And because I didn't have the money to pay anybody, I had to clean the bathroom myself. I did everything myself for the first year, and then slowly but surely, I was able to get enough money to pay for a janitorial service. To pay for. I met a handyman. This guy. Raphael. So Raphael was my first handyman. He was a kid who was involved in the gangs in Canoga Park. And I met him through his dad, who worked for the general contractor that I'd used. And his dad was worried about his kid, and I hired his kid as a handyman. And so Raphael, yeah, he was a good kid. Um, you know, for all the time that I knew Raphael, he was a good kid. When he left to go home, he was not such a good kid. He was banging, I guess they call it. He was running around with his crew doing bad things. And I remember there was a point where I actually offered him a full-time job, even though it kind of would have eaten into like the profit that the salon was making. I offered him a full-time job because I felt like having the accountability of showing up on time and kind of exposing him to, a healthier way of life would be good for him and kind of keep him out of trouble. And he turned it down. And then he felt, I think he felt ashamed that he turned it down, that he chose that path, the fork in the road, so to speak. Somebody like him doesn't get a lot of opportunities like that. I was trying to give it to him, and he turned it down, and I think he was a little ashamed, and he didn't want to come back and do any work on the side for me. And I heard that things didn't go well for him after that. So, but the time that I knew him, he was a good kid, and he was a hard worker, and he was good to his daughter and stuff like that. So, I remember things like that. Being in the salon 80 hours a week, you see a lot of things. We had a hairdresser who was down in the parking garage blowing cocaine while his client was, was getting processed in his studio, and her scalp started burning, and, she ran down the hallway, and bunch of other hairdressers and I ran over there and, rinsed her out and took care of her. And then I went down into the parking garage to find the hairstylist doing cocaine in his car and kicked him out of the salon. There are things like that. I mean, there have been wild, there have been wild things happen. So I'll just stop there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, those are many, many stories that I'm sure you've heard throughout
I don't
the
want to
years or
implicate
seen.
anyone or
Yeah.
anything.
All right, so that's pretty good. I think we're going to stop right there. We're going to make this a two-parter because we got a lot more to cover. So, yes.
I got a two-parter.
You are important enough, Eric, to become a two-part episode. Congratulations. So, yeah, we'll come back next week to finish up our conversation.
Look forward to that.